We're visiting Antelope Island today, which is 15 miles long by 5 miles wide. The history of the island and the human history of the island started with the Native Americans, but the first non-natives to visit the island were Kit Carson and John Fremont in 1845. They stumbled upon the island and discovered pronghorn antelope, and that is how the island actually got its name originally. We are here with Wendy Wilson, who is the Assistant Park Ranger on Antelope Island. Mm-hmm. Wendy, why don't you tell us a little bit about Antelope Island and why it's so special to you?
Sure. Yeah, Antelope Island is a really amazing place. It's the largest island in Great Salt Lake. It's 28,000 acres, and the expanses and the views are just endless and amazing. There's so much variety out here. There's so much you can see. The geology is incredible. The plant life is incredible. It's just a really amazing desert environment. The wildlife on Antelope Island is amazing. So it's one of the main things that people come to see is the wildlife. A herd of 700 bison, between 200 and 400 deer, pronghorn antelope, coyotes, owls, and on pretty much any given night, you can drive the island. You see the bison off in the distance. Right now, they have their little babies with them, so that's really cute and wonderful. And then there's antelope that are right next up to them. And when I see that, I always think, it's where the deer and the antelope play.
Yeah, like the song.
Yeah, exactly. So it is home on the range. Really wild feeling, right? You're 7 miles from the city, and you come out here, and it's
totally unspoiled.
Yeah.
And the other thing I think that people don't realize is how wet the island actually is because of all the natural springs that occur here.
Yeah, so it's a desert for sure. We don't get a lot of rain, but there is enough holding capacity within the island itself that we have more than 40 freshwater springs on the island, and that's where the wildlife get their water from, because obviously they don't drink the salt water.
Yeah, true.
But there's a lot of fresh water on the island.
Well, Wendy, thank you so much for, being so gracious and allowing us to interview you. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for coming out.
Thank you. By the late 1800s, it was determined that there were about 800 bison left in North America. At this stage, conservationists stepped in to help save the animals from extinction. 2 Utahns were really instrumental in this process, William Glassman and John Dooley. They introduced 4 bulls, 4 cows, and 4 calves onto the island on February 15th, 1893. And these 12 animals became the foundation for what today is one of the largest and oldest publicly owned herds in the entire nation. Conservationists also determined that in order to maintain the ecosystem here on the island, you would need between 550 and 700 bison on the island. Up until 1986, the only way to control those numbers was through hunting. But in 1987, the Division of Parks instituted the Bison Management program. And what that means is that every year since '87, all of the bison are rounded up, they are all vaccinated, they are checked for pregnancy, and they are weighed. And then the excess animals are sold off, and the rest of the herd is released back onto the range. What's really important about this roundup that happens in October every year is that it ensures that this herd remains and has remained pretty much disease-free, which is a rarity in the United States. We are standing in the historic ranch on Antelope Island, which was built by Fielding Gar in 1848. This particular structure is amongst several other structures here on the ranch. And what is unique about it is that Mr. Gar, who was such a great mason, built this place so well that it has withstood the elements for over 150 years. The other neat thing about the ranch and the buildings on it is that they were built with all natural material found on the island. So they took straw, they mixed that with clay, and then formed it into adobe bricks, and that is what all of these structures consist of. So we're standing in the Corral at Fielding Gar Ranch. You can see behind me that they've preserved a lot of the original automobiles from the era. This ranch was actually set up as a cattle and a sheep farming operation, and between 1920 and 1930, it was actually the largest sheep operation west of the Mississippi River. The ranch changed hands a lot during those years, but in 1981, the state of Utah purchased the southern 26,000 1,000 acres of Antelope Island. And the island itself then became state property, as the state had already owned the northern 2,000 acres since 1969. The geology on the island dates back to the Precambrian era, and some of the rocks found here are over 1.7 billion years old. The geography of the island is mainly alluvial plains and grasslands, and these grasslands help feed many of the grazing species that we find on Antelope Island. The grasses produce seeds. The seed feeds many of the rodent populations like kangaroo, rat, and mice that are in turn prey for the predators on the island like the coyote, badgers, 5 different species of owls, and peregrine falcons. The Great Salt Lake is a major staging and migratory breeding area for birds in the nation. The reason being that there is an abundant supply here of not only brine shrimp, but brine flies. And birds are the only animals that actually monopolize this food source. So they fly from the north, they stay here for about 3 or 4 months and gorge themselves on the flies and the shrimp, sometimes gaining as much as 4 times their weight before making the large trek down to South America.